So we are around the end of set 10. Unfortunately, it's already the end, or maybe fortunately for some of you. And I like to make this as a habit. At the end of every set, I make a huge video where I explain all the competitive comps that you can play, you can be flexible with, and also the comps that you will see during World Championships. So these comps are truly good, and this is coming from a challenger player, obviously. Buckle up because this video is going to be very long. I'm going to go through 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, and fast 8, meaning 4 cost and 5 cost comps, basically. So you can be sure to be flexible, not only with the items, but also with the units, and also the way you want to play the game, because you will see the pace for each comps are kinda different. Let's get going. So let's start right away with the 1 cost reroll comps. To help you remember all these comps, I made 4 cheat sheets, basically a cheat sheet for 1 cost reroll, for 2 cost, for 3 cost, and fast 8 comps. All of them are on Tactor. It will be much easier for you to remember them if you go on this website, especially if you are inside the game. It will be easier just to find them rather than going back to this video and specifically find each part of the video. So everything is free, obviously. The links will be in the description, and out of transparency, Tactor is also the sponsor of my channel, and basically they help me fund all these videos where you can consume all the content for free. So actually it's really helpful, and if you want to help me, you can just put a like on each guide. It helps you quite a lot, and I appreciate that. So let's get going into the videos. So one thing I want to say first about the 1 cost reroll comps is the general game plan. Obviously I wrote it here as a cheat sheet, obviously, but the idea is like you want to start the game and you kind of want to go for 1 cost reroll comp if you have already the headliner and maybe 1 or 2 copies of that unit, and you have a proper itemization, meaning that you don't need to chase all the items. You already have like at least 2 good components, basically. And then after, you never push your levels during stage 2. You make sure you stay the lowest level possible to have more chances to find the 1 cost units. And at stage 3-1, you will roll down to 0 gold if needed to find your 3-star 1 cost unit, because this is going to be important. You will need to win the fights during stage 3 to start a big win streak. That way you can rebuild your economy and get a huge health advantage. I also separated the comps by tier, and I wanted to talk first about Ahri Reroll, which is tier S in my opinion. So the way you want to play her, most of the time you prefer, if possible, to have the MO, but actually I had a game with Spell Weaver and it wasn't that bad. In fact, I finished first with it. So don't sleep on Ahri. Make sure you always have copies during stage 1, and potentially Ahri 2 or Ahri 3 can come super fast. So the way you want to play with her is you want to build Shojin and you want to build Nashor's Tooth, because she's going to have a spell crit from Superfan. If you can reach Nico 3, Echo 3, go for it. Though sometimes, quite often, I would even say it will be hard to find them because they will be contested. And the way you want to play her is like find Ahri 3 at stage 3-1. She's that good that from this spot, you could literally never lose a fight until you're level 8. This can happen. So if that happens, great. At level 8, see whether you have to roll a little bit, either to play Lulu 3 or Ahri 2 as your side carries. But what I really like to do, but that happens only if you can, obviously, is that you push level 9 even, and from this spot, you play the legendary units. So Ziggs and Sona. If you have Ginzo Sona, if you have Shojin Sona, play Sona attack speed. She will give tons of power to Ahri, and she'll be like basically the way you can finish first, because obviously during the very late game, if Ahri is your only carry, she will not help you finishing first. She will lack damage. So this is why you need to rely either on Lulu 3. Here I didn't put Lulu 3, but you can do that, or Sona and Ziggs as your very late game side carries, and that way you can finish first. So in my opinion, I looked at the stats at the same time, but if you really want to play this comp, like one of the strongest, most broken augment is Emotional Connection. This way Sona will get tons of mana, Ziggs as well, Lulu as well, plus Hyper Pop and all of that. This is just insanely strong in the very late game, and this is why, like, honestly, if I have Emotional Connection at tier 1, I'm seriously considering forcing Ahri, even if I don't necessarily have a lot of Ahri in my shops, but it's fine. You can also have other augments. These are just the most broken. I'm not showing all the relevant augments because like there are too many, but the most broken basically. You have 3 the crowd. Honestly, 3 the crowd, don't sleep on it. Basically, this augment is like, as long as you have at least 3 cost units, it's worth picking it. Basically, you have a great value of a gold augment if you have 3. If you have 4 or more, it's even better. But in that case, you have 3 with Nico, Echo, and Lulu, and that's plenty enough. And finally, surprisingly, Vampirism is really good on this comp. It's simply because like you probably lose a lot of health in the early game before you find Ahri 3, and sometimes Ahri can get some damage, AoE damage from Ezreals and stuff like that. So having a bit of sustain allows her to survive basically and be still strong in the very late game. Then the next comp is Yasuo Reroll. So Yasuo Reroll, I consider it as A tier, is not as reliable as Ahri, but it's still very, very strong, especially if you start with a good spot. So same as Ahri, the way you want to play it, you must have a couple of good amount of Yasuos, meaning one handliner plus a few copies. That's really nice. And also you need to have at least an offensive item. I really like to have an Infinity Edge at the first item, because the idea is like, even if you lose fights in the early game, Yasuo still needs to kill at least 1 or 2 units so he can stack his AD. That's his spells basically. And the more he stacks in the early game, the better he will be in the very late game. It's like exponential, right? If you don't have a good amount of stacks during stage 2 and stage 3, your Yasuo in the very late game will have only 50% attack damage bonus from his passive. But if you manage to have a good amount of kills in the early game, and he stacks even better because he has more AD, so during the mid game he will be stronger. Because he's stronger, he will stack more, and since he stacks more, he will be even stronger, and he will stack even more. Basically, it's this kind of a snowball, and if you manage to achieve this snowball in the early game, he can have like literally 100% AD instead of 50% if you have a bad start, and that's a huge difference. So this is why I really like Yasuo, but only if you play with a good board. So even if you lose, he can kill a lot of units, and this is why I like to have also Infinity Edge, an offensive item, as his first item, because if you start with something like Edge of Night, cool, he doesn't die easily, but he doesn't kill easily as well, and he gets no stack basically. So the way you want to play it obviously is with 6 true damage. Seriously, don't pick Yasuo Edgelord. I mean, you can pick it as a transition, but definitely it's not going to be enough to make you win if you don't have 6 true damage. The way you want to play it, at 3-1 you roll down, you have to have Yasuo 3, you have to have at least 2 items on him so he can stack more during stage 3, so you can have a huge win streak. And then after you push level 8, and this is where you find Akali, this is where you potentially find Qiyana. If you don't have Qiyana, you have Kennen instead, and this is where you have your 6 true damage at level 8 and a huge side carry like Akali that can help you get to level 9, and at level 9 you can add Qiyana that will help you to have the very, very late game comp, especially if you have Qiyana 2 with 3 items. She will give tons of items, you will have tons of items, and you will start to do stuff like things like Viego, even though he's not your main carry, but you just have too many items, so why not put on Viego? He can help you deal a little bit of damage. The most broken augments you want to play when you start the game is like Blinked Out. It's broken, obviously. Idealism, extremely strong. You have a Hush on Yasuo, so you already have one of your items since the beginning, and it goes very well on Akali, on Qiyana as well. And Not Today, really nice. It's on Yasuo, great. It's also on Akali and Qiyana, so you have 3 potential great users of Not Today, even Viego, so 4 potentially great users. Obviously, Vampirism is insane, but I really wanted to highlight the one that stands out the most here, and those 3, like if you have a game, for instance, with those 3 augments, unless you lower your Yasuo, it's probably a first, basically, but that's it. Then after we have Jinx and Vi Punk. So Jinx and Vi Punk is kind of easy. For me, it's A tier, but if you manage to have 6 Punk, it becomes SS tier, and that's something you cannot necessarily control, except if you are something like Rendering Trainer, or you have the Spatula map, and you can build Punk Spatula, basically. So the way you want to play it is very simple. Let's say that you're pretty sure you don't have a Punk emblem. In that case, you're really okay with picking Jinx Rapid Fire. It's maybe a bit better than Jinx Punk, but it simply depends on what you have. Usually you're not picky. You can even pick Vi, actually. Vi Mosher, Vi Punk is really nice, and it's, I think, slightly better even, because that way you can stabilize your board much easier. And in simple, the way you want to play it, you use your Punk reroll every turn, even during stage 2, to have more chances to find your Vi, your Pantheon, your Jinx, and also it makes them stronger because you spend money on the shop, so the Punk will have more HP and more AD. And you want to build items for Vi and Jinx first. So for Vi, don't spend too much time on Vi. Don't necessarily try to have the beast item. Try to have maybe Event Shroud, Serac, Gargoyle, Declo, a lot of bruiser / tank items. She's going to be really, really good in the early game. And for Jinx, however, you want to build a lot of items with bows. So you have Ginzu, you have Runan, you have Giant Slayer, but you can also have Last Whisper if you don't have Event Shroud. You can even have Deathblade. Just try not to make IE, it's really not great on her. And then once you've done that, you have multiple choices, and you still have good amount of flexibility in this comp. You can go for Pantheon 3 and Twitch 3 and Vex 3 and Amumus 3, but in that case it means that you need to have a lot of items. So usually you do that if you have a map with a lot of items, or if you have an augment that gives you a lot of items, basically. If not, then you can try rather to push your level, push 9, and play with Lucian as your side carry with 4 rapid fire with Lucian and Caitlyn for something like this, for instance, and just after have a good amount of frontline, so 4 Guardian, 4 rapid fire, and that's that's pretty much it. So you have a lot of flexibility of win conditions. If you have a spat punk, obviously it's much easier to win. In that case, you really need to have +1 punk as your trait for the headliner. So either a Vi, Jinx, can be Pantheon as well, as long as you have everything 3 stars. And the best punk units you want are Poppy, which is more accessible than Yorick, so you can have her during level 8. But obviously in the very, very late game, Yorick is the strongest unit you can have with punk. This is absolutely insane how much damage, how much tankiness he has with just a spat punk and with 4 guardian. So there are a couple broken augments. Extended play basically is the strongest augment you can get, but only if you have it at 2-1. If you have it at 3-2, it's not that great anymore, but at 2-1 it's insane, can give you a lot of gold and will help you reach your interest thresholds even if you're using your 1 gold every turn with punk. So this is kind of insane. You have ramping rhythm, which is really nice in that setup, especially if you have 4 rapid fire, but in that case it's best that you don't have a Ginzu at all, because this is already giving tons of attack speed. So it's best to have like a double giant slayer, you can have a Death Blade inside, just have more damage because you don't need that much attack speed honestly. And finally, one thing I really like is Lucky Gloves Plus, so the one you get at 3-2, because it can give you basically 2 Thieves Gloves. I mean, if you have already 1 glove plus you have 3 from that, you have 2-3 gloves. Like I said earlier, you can play this comp and you can literally have Thieves Gloves on Pantheon 3 and Twitch 3, and that's it. You have a lot of items, all your 3 stars are almost stuffed, and that's it. You're just too strong. And then finally, the last 1-cost reroll comp I find it super competitive and easy to play is Olaf Reroll, which is A tier as well. So Olaf Reroll is a comp that's been there for a couple patches, but it has evolved a little bit. So you have 2 ways to play it, but I find the most efficient way to play it is with Sona as your late game side carry. So the other way you can play it is with KL3. I already presented this version in my previous guides, but here I wanted to show this version because I feel like this version is somehow easier to hit and can cap even more than KL. So that's why I feel like it's less risky and stronger, and that's why I feel like this version is just better. So obviously you want to play Olaf with +1 bruiser. It's really important to hit 6 bruisers because Olaf has a scaling based on his maximum health. So the more max health he has, the more attack speed he can get when he goes low in health. Basically that's how it works, and that's why 6 bruisers is much better than something like 7 pentakill for instance. So just like all the other 1-cost reroll, you reroll Olaf 3 at 3-1. You want to make sure he has at least 2 items, if not 3 at this moment, and after you try to snowball, you get a lot of economy from win streaking, and then you can push level 8 and push level 9 to have this board. Finding Illaoi is really important. Finding Sona obviously is really important. When you play Sona in this situation, you play Sona with attack speed because she gives a lot of attack speed to Olaf, and Olaf already has a lot of attack speed, so he will deal a lot of damage with the on-hit effect from Sona's ability. So that's why this synergy is so good, and you don't even need to have Sona 2 to have a lot of damage. Obviously if you have Sona 2 it's even better, but it's just way too good. And obviously you also want to have 3 pentakill because it gives Olaf 15% damage reduction, so he's much tankier with pentakill, but also after 5 kills he will get a lot more attack speed, so like the synergy is just way too good. The best build for him is Titan BT. Then you want to have some defensive item on Zac, who's an excellent tank who can also deal a lot of crowd control, so he's really difficult to deal with for the opponents. In that case you want to have Event Shroud that will help Olaf dealing more damage, and then after you just like want anything you have left. So Declo is really nice, Crown Guard usually is really nice as well, but whatever you have, right? And then make sure to always have at least 1 Ginzu available because it will be either on KL or on Sona later if you can't make KL 3, and this is just perfect. So for this comp, the best augments, the one that are literally broken and make this comp into tier S if you have them, is Too Big to Fail. First of all, gives ton of damage, so every bruiser is kind of a ticking bomb. That's a lot of damage. Gargantuan obviously gives you 1 Titan, make the Titan better, and Heavy Hitters makes tons of AD for Olaf. All the bruisers have a lot of offensive stats, and don't necessarily sleep on them because even if they're not your main carry, you will see like things like Seth dealing 2k damage instead of 1k, and everyone will deal like a couple of hundred or thousands of damage, and that will be like quite a lot of damage accumulated, and Olaf will definitely not be the only one dealing damage. So now let's talk about the 2-cost reroll comps. Some of them are only 2 costs and some of them are a mix between 2 costs and 3 costs, but you kind of want to roll both at the same time, so I included those 2 types of comps in this part of the cheat sheet. So basically the way you want to play it, most of the time you play these comps when you don't necessarily have a strong stage 2, but you have a good amount of money and you have the items that you already want to have for your headliners later. So the usual way to play if you want to force it is to never push stage 2, is to keep your econ at max level possible, and only at stage 3-2 you will push level 6 and you will stabilize your board. So this is important to stabilize, meaning that you need to have a 2-star frontline plus your headliner plus 2 items on your headliner, and from that point you want to rebuild your econ. And now you have 2 options from this point, is either you want to play 2 cost reroll with a 3 cost reroll, or you're also looking for 4 cost units. In that case you will slowly push level 7 and you will slow roll at level 7. But if you're looking for a comp that only has a 2 cost reroll to reroll, in that case you stay level 6 and you slow roll at level 6 until you find your 3 stars, and then after you push. Very attention to that, because this is literally game changer, and if you don't follow this properly you will just never find your 3-star units. So let's start with an S tier reroll comp. So this is the kind of reroll comp I prefer to reroll at level 7, but I need to stabilize at level 6 first. If not, I will just die before reaching level 7. It's scale with Mordekaiser. So the way you want to play right now, maybe the bug will be fixed by the next patch, I don't know. There is a bug right now when I'm making this video, which is like if you have super fan Ginzu on Kale might have her Ginzu reset to 0 whenever you are summoning a unit on the board. So something like Yurik's goals will actually stop the Ginzu from the super fan on Kale. Kind of weird, basically. That's why having Kale headliner right now, it might change in the future, but right now isn't that great at the moment I'm making this video, so before patch 14.4. But anyway, Mordekaiser is such a good unit, and he has much better headliner bonus than Kale. 100% of the time you want to play with Mordekaiser headliner. So the way I would play this comp is like at 3-2, I roll down to have Lilia 2, Gnar 2, 1 Nico at the very least, 1 Mordekaiser at the very least, and 1 headliner. I prefer not Kale if possible, that way I can switch it easily later, but if it's Kale, pick Kale. And then at level 7, I resell my headliner and I try to have headliner Mordekaiser, and that way I can have potentially Mordekaiser 3 plus Kale 3. One thing that I want to mention is like Crown Guard is the item you get from Superfan. And if you look at the stats, Crown Guard is by far the best item for Mordekaiser, and it's just broken. So double Crown Guard plus BT, so he can survive, he can deal more damage, he can stack more AP and stats, and Kale behind with double Ginzu and Gunblade will simply like scale in the fight and give a lot of health to all the units who won't die easily, basically. You will see a lot in those 3 cost and 2 cost reroll that Shopping Spree and March of Progress are broken, because they help you to reach level 6 easily with a lot of resources or a lot of rerolls, so you can stabilize very easily, and then after you can still have a lot of gold to still push level 7 or naturally push level 7 and still stabilize a lot and roll a lot at level 7. So these 2 omens, you will see them quite often in the comp I'm going to show, because they are just broken and they are just like literally designed to make 2 cost and 3 cost reroll comps. Other than that, you have Metalhead, which is really nice, and you have Remember Your Roots, because everyone is a pentakill almost, so everyone gets tons of stats from this moment. Then the next comp I really like to play, I already said it many times I think, but Seraphine Reroll for me is a really good comp. I think it's only A tier if you can't have the KDA emblem, but if you can get the KDA emblem, it becomes S tier to me. Basically it means that if I don't have the KDA emblem, I'm not fighting for first. I will never finish first, I'm pretty sure, but if I have the KDA emblem, I have the potential to finish first, and that's good enough basically as a comp. This comp is really easy. You roll down at 3-2 to have Lilia 2, 1 Echo, 1 Nico, Kenan 2, and Seraphine headliner, and from that you're extremely stabilized. You just need to make sure you have items for her, so she will get a Rabadon Death Cap from Superfan, so you want to have 1 item for mana and 1 item like Morello that is damage but also utility, so she's going to be very strong in the mid game. And from that point you're stabilized, you can push level 7 and you will slow roll level 7 because you want to find Ahri as well, and then you want to find Akali. These are 4 cost units, so you kind of have no chance, let's say, to find them at level 6, and these are extremely important to have them early so you can have a side carry besides Seraphine. If you have a KDA emblem, I really like to try to play Lulu Reroll next to Seraphine instead of Kesa, and Lulu with KDA plus these items is a monster. That's why I really like to have the KDA emblem I was talking about earlier. So like I said, March of Progress, Shopping Spree are broken for this comp as well, but here you really like to have Remember Your Roots. Everyone is a KDA, so everyone gets a lot of stats, and then after Cybernetic Uplink, because obviously Seraphine is a great holder, Ahri as well, potentially you have Lulu, you have Akali who is stuffed as well, on Nico is nice as well, so obviously all of these cybernetic are really good. Okay, next we have Senna Reroll. It's really similar to Seraphine. The only difference is that you play True Damage instead of KDA, and the super fun item for Senna is Shojin. So now for Senna, you don't want to have mana generation item. Instead, you will look for very offensive items like Rabadon Deathcap, which is I think one of her best items, and then Natural Tools to have still more AP, but also a bit more of attack speed that is really nice to have, especially if you pair it with pure Shojin. So same as Seraphine, the way you want to play it at 3-2, you want to have a super fun setup with 2-star Lilia, 2-star Kennen, 1 Echo, 1 Nico. If you have them 2 stars, it's even better, but it's kind of high rolling honestly. And then you want to have Seraphine Headliner. The best headliner obviously is True Damage, but I think that if you have Rapid Fire, you can play with Rapid Fire at least for the mid game and maybe switch it later. And here what I really like to do is kind of similar to Seraphine. I like to reroll at level 7 so I have more chance to find Akali and I have more chances than to have 6 True Damage. But there are times where I feel like with Senna, you have to roll at level 6 until you have Senna 3, because I feel like sometimes she's not as good as Seraphine to make you stabilize your mid-game board. And if you start to go too low in HP, you have no choice but to roll at level 6 basically. But if you can roll at level 7, it's even better because you have access to Akali, like I said, and you might even high roll 1 Kiana or 1 Lucian, and that will never happen at level 6. So if you have the comfort to do it because you put yourself in a situation where you can high roll, and that can make a difference honestly. One of the most broken augments for this comp is Blinked Out, and if you have Blinked Out at tier 1, you can almost force this comp. Then obviously you have Martial Progress and Tropic Spree, and you have a lot of good augments like combat augments and things like this, but these are the 3 I'm really happy to have if I can to play Senna Reroll. Alright, the next one is Bard and Misfortune Jazz, which is an A tier comp as well. So this comp you probably have maybe PTSD from the beginning of the set when this comp was clearly dominating, but now it's not dominating, but it's still very good. Once again, like you will see like all these comps, all of them almost need to have a super fan base, because like this is the cheapest frontline you can have with the most efficient tankiness. It is not the strongest frontline you will find in the game, but it's just so cheap and easy to hit, so it's so efficient for how easy it is to have them. So here I'm showing the version with Bard as your headliner. If you hit it quite early, let's say at 3-2, the best headliner obviously is with Jazz, but honestly don't sleep on Bard Dazzler, because you can't reach 4 Jazz if you have it, but you have a much stronger mid game, so you still have a great game if you have the Bard Dazzler instead. So the best 3 items for Bard are obviously Adaptive Helm from the super fan, you cannot change that, but then after you want to have blue buff, and this actually gives a lot of mana. This is really good because not only it lowers the max mana for Bard so he can cast more often, but at the beginning of the fight, since he's the headliner, but at the beginning of the fight he's the headliner, you know, like spread a lot of dudes, and there's a high chance he kills someone with that, at least a squishy unit on the side or something like this, so he can get the bonus damage from the beginning of the fight until the end almost. And then Rabadon, because he needs a lot of AP and a good amount of damage amplification, honestly that makes like almost 30% of damage amplification whenever he kills someone, so that's a lot of damage. He can be like really terrifying. And next to him, usually what you want to have is Misfortune 3. The best items for her is double Ginzu plus Deathblade, so she can still have a lot of AD. With a good frontline, that's really enough, and you have 2 monsters in the late game. If you cannot reach Misfortune 3 but you still have Bard 3, because let's say they don't come or Misfortune is contested, you can try to push your level and go with Lucian, who can take a double Ginzu plus Deathblade. Lucian is also going to be a monster, so really don't just tunnel vision into Misfortune 3 all the time, because she's not mandatory. In the same way, Bard 3 is not mandatory. If you have MF Jazz, you can play her as your main carry, and you can have Lucian as your side carry, or even Ziggs. It depends. It really doesn't matter. You have 4 potential late game carries. You have Misfortune, Ziggs, Bard, and Lucian. Just make sure you have at least one for the mid game, so either Bard or Misfortune, and one that can also deal a good amount of damage for the late game, so Misfortune 3 or Ziggs 2 or Lucian 2. So really you have quite a good flexible amount of units behind, and don't be like, oh, I can't hit Misfortune, I cannot win, because you have two other options next to Misfortune as your side carry. And then after we have the broken augments. That Jazz Baby, if you have a 2-1 or 3-2, is completely insane. Shopping Spree, March of Progress, because like I said earlier, they will help you have all the 3-star units without spending that much money into something else like XP or rolling. And one that is probably surprising you is Endless Horde. So this augment is really difficult to play, and I think a lot of people just don't like to pick it. But this augment is broken whenever you want to play Jazz, because you can have so many units on the board and you can have like plus 50% of health and 40% of damage when you have 4 Jazz, just because you have too many units. So even if the drawback is like you cannot have 3 items on your carries, but they will have so much more damage, so much more health, that as if they had 2 items on them thanks to this Jazz bonus. Then Katarina Reroll is definitely a playable comp, but I find it a bit weaker than the other. That's why I put her at B tier. I think this is, and you will see for all the B tier comp, these comps are still playable. They're definitely strong, but you cannot force them. You have to play them if the game gives you a comp, basically. If you have natural Katarina, if you have the items naturally, if you don't need to roll too much to find your 3 stars or your comp and stuff like that, in that case they are really good. But if you force them from a spot where you don't have Katarina, you can't find the items and all of that, you're probably going to finish like in the bottom, right? So that's why for me they are B tier. In that case, when you play Katarina, you want to reroll at level 6 or level 7 depending on, again, on your spot, just like for Senna. Usually it's best at 7 because at level 7 you can have either Yone 3 or Z2. I prefer Z2 potentially as your side carry because you don't have Edgelord, so Yone is less efficient, and Z is really good, but he might be a bit contested. And for the items, you have a Hoj from Superfan, so you really want to have a spell crit on Katarina. That way she can use all the crit chance from the Hoj, and you want to have another Hoj because actually one Hoj is not enough, and sometimes she can take too much damage and die without having enough sustain. So with double Hoj, you make sure like she can literally tank, take damage, and spam her ability and get a lot of health from that, and like doing some kind of 1v9 fights. So you probably face that at least once in your life. Shopping Spree as usual. Idealism broken on Katarina, and you can also have Hoj instead of BT on Z, so he has much more damage. Vampirism, not today, because you can have that on a lot of Crowd Diver and it's really useful. And we have Jax and Lux EDM. So this comp is having some struggles to be really strong and be A tier comp, so that's why I put it in B tier. So this comp is still definitely good, but you cannot force it, and the way you want to play it is when you have, for instance, a Zhonya at 2-1. If you have a Zhonya at 2-1, you can think of playing Jax, because without the Zhonya, and if you have Edge of Night instead, you will see that Jax is struggling a little bit because Zhonya gives so much more stats than Edge of Night, and also the invulnerability is much better because it lasts longer. So you want to stabilize at stage 3-2 by having Jax, EDM, plus having a good setup around it, but you want to slow roll at level 7 because you will want to find Zac 2, you will want to find Z2, you will want to find Lux 3. So that's a lot of units to find, and that's why I feel like this comp, for instance, is not playable if you don't have March of Progress or Shopping Spree, or if you're not high rolling it, basically. And then after, all about the augments, I told you something that can give you Zhonya is insane, but if you have Jewel Lotus is extremely powerful because it means that all the EDM units, when they are going to copy Jax's ability, they are able to crit and deal more damage. Also, there's one trick I already explained in one of my previous video, but I'm going to explain it here again. Is like once you have Jax 3 and Lux 3, you should actually position yourself so both are on the same side. When you start a fight and you see that the carry of the opponent is on the left side, so in the same side as your carries here, you put back the EDM sample, you put it on Jax, and if you see that the opponent has his carry on the opposite side, just before the fight starts, you quickly put the EDM sample on Lux so she can snipe that carry and you win the fight. However the opponent is positioned, you will always have an edge, but you just need to make sure you position the EDM sample properly at the beginning of the fight after you see the board. And finally, we have another one of the 2-cost/3 cost reroll when they are mixed together is Mosher Reroll. So this one also is B tier, but obviously if you have Summit to the Pit is at least A tier, but since you can't necessarily have this augment all the time, if you try to play this, it might be a bit lacking in the very late game. So the way you want to play it is with Gnar as your main carry and the headliner. The best headliner I believe is Superfan. That way he can have a free Sterak. By the way, Sterak is the best item for Gnar because he will transform, he will get tons of HP, and thanks to that, he will gain even more max health based on his total max health. So that's why the synergy is just so good together. And you can have Titan's Resolve, or you can have things like IE, Hush. Even though having some sustain is not necessarily the best because you have 6 Mosher, so everyone has a lot of Omnivamp already, and that's why you don't really want to have BT. That's why you don't really want to have Gunblade because it just doesn't really work together. It's just too much sustain. Instead, you prefer to have either more defense or more offense, and Titan is kind of a good middle ground for that. And then after having Gnar, obviously you really want to have Urgot as your secondary carry, and this is why you want to reroll at level 7. That way you also have good chances to fight Poppy, and this is why you have such a good team in the very late game. You can also potentially high roll a Yorick at level 7, and that will make your game much easier. But even if you don't have it, this has a strong mid game, very strong mid game, difficult to go through that, and that way you can cap your board during stage 3, stage 4, have a win streak, have a lot of health, and use that advantage to slow roll every turn and have more chances to find your 3 stars. Okay, now let's talk about the 3-cost reroll. So Yone Crowd Diver to me is still S tier. People are not contesting this too much anymore. I don't know why. I feel like this combo is still good, but maybe because it's a little bit difficult to set it up compared to before. Maybe the pace of the games have changed a little bit. But the way you want to play Yone, it's really simple. Like you want to have Yone, the best is with Crowd Diver, but don't sleep on Edgelord or Heartsteel. You might have a bit less power, but with Heartsteel you can get more items, you can get more resources, and you can stuff more side carries like Viego, like Zed. So it's not that bad. It's just like you don't have as much power on Yone, but you can try to translate that power to some other units, and overall your board is still good. Basically, that's what I want to say. The way you want to play it is IE, Hush, and I like to have Edge of Night. Trinity Force is insane instead of Edge of Night as well. That way you can also potentially with Freaky Friday have Trinity Force on Zed, who loves this item. Zed with Trinity Force is insanely good. That's it. You want to activate 3 Pentakill, 3 Edgelord, and that's pretty much it. The way you want to play it, and it will be the same for all the other reroll comps, you want to push level 7 at stage 4-1, and you want to roll and stabilize at stage 4-1 with your 2-star Fortnite plus 3-cost headliner. So here you want to have 2-star Mordekaiser, 2-star Echo, you want to have a Yone headliner, and ideally you want to have at least 1 Viego, 1 Zed. That way you can have a good synergy on your board. And then from that point, normally you're more or less stabilized, and you will slowly roll for your 3 stars, and until you hit it, you will win basically. So the broken augments for this comp are Freaky Friday, already talked about it. I feel like Shopping Spree is insane. You can have an insane amount of free rolls at level 7, so it's almost impossible not to hit. Idealism, because obviously this is insane for all the crowd divers. Vampirism, because most of the time Zed and Yone will be happy to have more sustain, and not today, as you can give that to Yone, to Zed, to Kiana. You can even give that to Viego if he has some stuff and he is your side carry. Don't forget to have Event Shroud on your Mordekaiser with defensive stuff. That way Yone and Zed will have more chances to melt the front line in front of them, and then after rush into the back line. Then we have Riven 8-bit. It's quite similar to Yone, but it's also quite different. So the way you want to play it is like you have the same base as Yone. You can see Mordekaiser, Kerl, and Viego. So this gives the Pentakill Edgelord. And after you want to have 8-bit, that's the best version of Riven. You can have Edgelord. It's not that bad. Don't worry about it. It's just that you might have to play Corki or something like this. That's kind of weird to have the 4 8-bit and have a lot of AD. The only thing that's a bit different from Riven and Yone is like Riven is a little bit less flexible with the items. You really need her to be invulnerable to CC, so usually you build Quicksilver unless you have something like Indomitable Will, but you also need to have sustain because unlike Yone, she cannot have more sustain from her ability. And then after the third item, you really need to have something that gives damage. Giant Slayer is one of the best. You have IE, that's really nice, but Giant Slayer is usually the best. Then after, you also need to build a side carry, and your base side carry carry is Caitlyn. So the problem is like, since you prioritize items for Riven, you prioritize items for Mordekaiser, you probably don't have the ability to build the perfect Caitlyn items. So just build whatever you can as long as it makes sense. So it can be Runan, can be Deathblade, can be Giant Slayer, can be Red Buff. A lot of stuff doesn't have to be this. Just build whatever you can. And ideally, you can also have 6 8-bit. And if you can have 6 8-bit, you really want to give that either to Viego if he's 2 stars, or Lucian if you find Lucian and you can assure you can have Lucian 2 later. The next one is country reroll. So the reason I put A tier is because it's really dependent on whether you can find the country emblem or not. If you cannot find it, it's kind of B tier. If you can find it, it's more like S tier. So I just made that A tier as the average. Most difficult part of this comp is to have a lot of 3 stars. So this comp requires a lot of money, and this is why you need to have a strong mid game to have more money from win streak, from winning fights, and more health as well, so you're not panicking, so you can slow roll every single turn. The best way to have more money is to have the country emblem, because that way you win your fights. Since you win your fights, you can slow roll, you can chill for complete stage, and then you can like have a lot more gold interest than your opponent, and then after you find your 3 stars. The other way to have money is to have march of progress. That way you'll naturally level 7, level 8. You don't need to push anything. It also means that all the gold you have, you use it to roll and find your units. So that's why this omen is kind of broken for country. You have also another thing you need to solve with this comp, similarly to Punk, I told earlier, is that this comp requires a lot of items. You have so many 3-star units, you want to have items on them, or they are kind of useless, I kind of want to say. So this is why things like Lucky Gloves, Sleight of Hand are insanely good, because these gloves on Urgot, even if you don't have the Lucky Gloves, is always valuable. It's even better if you can have Lucky Gloves or Sleight of Hand, or both. If you have both, probably a first place spot, but it's kind of rare. And obviously, Three's a Crowd, I told you earlier, it's probably the best combat augment if you play country, because you have so many 3-cost units. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 75. That's a lot of health, especially if all of them are 3 stars. It's just like, sometimes it's just like you have too much health and the opponent doesn't have the DPS to go through your tanks, so that's how you win. You just like too beefy. Then we have Vex with 6 Executioners. So Executioners got quite nerfed during patch 14.3, but it doesn't mean that this comp is still trash now. In fact, that's why I put it A tier. It used to be S tier before, so it's kind of normal to be A tier. This comp heavily relies on Vex and Amumu 3, and heavily relies on a good Karthus as your side carry. And because you're rerolling like your 3-cost unit, you want to be level 7 when you reroll that, so you have a chance to have Karthus as well. Good news is Karthus is a little bit less contested at the time I'm making this video. It might be more contested later, but I'm not sure. So it's not that hard anymore, and you want to prioritize Vex's items and Amumu. So you want to have Nashor, Rabadon, and Gunblade. You don't really want to have mana generation item, because if you have them, it's better to have them on Karthus, something like Adaptive Herb or Shojin, for instance. So that's why you really want to have like very offensive and having a Hextech Gunblade to help your Amumu 3 stand longer, basically. This comp, I think, is not necessarily forceable, but if you have March of Progress, it is, of course. If you have Emotional Connection, it is forceable, because not only it gives you already a Vex, but honestly, like, you will see your Karthus dealing a lot damage with Emotional Connection, because he will get a lot of mana. And similarly to country, having more items, so binary airdrop, is really nice, because that way you can even stuff potentially Samurai 3, Twitch 3 if you manage to make them, or Akali 2, or even Pantheon 3. You have a lot of options to cap your board. So this is one of the comps that the more items you have, the stronger you are, because there are comps like if you have too many items, they're just not worth it, because you just put items on the freaking Nami 2 if you play TF, and that's not useful. But you will always find a spot to have more items. And finally, you also have Exposed Weakness, which is really nice. That way you don't need to build Ionic Spark, and you can have another tough defensive item like a double gargoyle or something like this on Amumu to make it even more difficult to kill. And then the last Reroll comp I want to talk about is Lulu Reroll. This comp is a little bit difficult and trickier than the other Reroll comp, but the way you want to play it is to have Lulu as your headliner. I feel like Hyperpop is better, because it helps you have a better late game scaling fight with Ziggs, basically. But it's fine if you have Spellweaver, because as you can see, if you have Lulu Spellweaver, you can reach 5 Spellweaver, so that's still good. It's just like you have a stronger mid game, but you probably have a weaker late game compared to Hyperpop. top, but it doesn't really matter. Once again, I think here the most important part is to find Lulu quite fast and not be greedy with it. So in case you didn't know, Lulu gets a Shojin from Superfan, and you might find that weird that even with a Shojin I want to give a blue buff, and it's really simple because Lulu has 40 max mana, and with 40 max mana and a Shojin, that's still 3 attacks before she can cast, and that's kind of weird. It's kind of wasted Shojin, right? It doesn't feel right. So the way you can maximize it is to have blue buff with Shojin or double Shojin. It works as well, but blue buff is better than Shojin overall, so she can have 30 max mana, and that way with the Shojin from Superfan she can cast every 2 attacks. Similarly to Ahri, with blue buff she can cast every 2 attacks. And then after, for the third item, you still want to have something that's a bit offensive. Rabadon, it can be Nashor, it can be Gunblade, but she might lack a little bit of damage unless you have 5 Spellweaver, but here I don't have 5 Spellweaver, so I prefer to have Rabadon, and that way she can cast very fast. She will have a lot of stun, a lot of utility, she will give a lot of hyper pop bonus to Sona, Ziggs, and Ziggs can give that to Ahri as well. So that's kind of a snowball effect, and that way you can have a strong late game fight. The only thing that makes this comp literally broken is hologram on Lulu. That way she can give hyper pop to the Lulu 3 next to her, and Lulu 3 will cast often, so she can give hyper pop as well to the main Lulu, and then you have Ziggs next to it, and that's just like mana battery, and your backline keeps on casting, and you don't care about having 3 Spellweaver at this moment because you cast so many times, you have so much AP at the end of the game. So now let's talk about the fast 8 comps. There's one thing I want to talk about these comps. Even though those comps are called fast 8, meaning that you try to reach level 8 as fast as possible with enough gold so you can roll and find your units, it's important that these kind of comps are usually unplayable if you lost too much health in stage 2 and stage 3. Meaning that, for instance, if you have the strategy to open 4 during stage 2 and stage 3, don't try to aim for these comps because most of the time you will have to push at stage 4-1 or 4-2, but you won't have enough gold to find all the focus units, and most of the time you will finish 8th. So don't try to aim for these comps if you have a bad early game. So let's talk about these comps. Zed, Ezreal, Hearthsteel, it's SS tier. This comp is literally broken. There's nothing that can cap higher than that. It requires you to have Hearthsteel during stage 3, stage 4, so you can have a huge cash out and get even more resources, and that's pretty much it. This comp is really flex. Don't necessarily aim for just Zed, Zac, and all of that. Don't hesitate to pick things like Poppy chosen, Zac chosen, Caitlyn chosen. It doesn't have to be Ezreal and Zed at the same time. It can be 2 side carries together as long as you have the items. So the way you want to play this comp, you still want to play rather heavy AD. Ideally you have blue buff, Infinity Edge, and Hoj. I like Hoj on Ezreal honestly, but it doesn't have to be Hoj. It can be Giant Slayer, it can be Infinity Edge again, or stuff like that. Then your side carry, Zed, if you have Zed, is IE, Edge of Night, Hoj. If you have Caitlyn, is whatever. If you have Lucian, is red buff, Runan, plus Ginzu, whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as the items make sense, as long as you have everything to start. That's the most important part. So to play this comp, there's kind of a broken strategy. It's like if you have Tiny Titans, Tiniest Titan, Metabolic Accelerator, basically things that gives you more health, you can force this comp, let's say, because it's fine if you have 5 Hearthsteel and losing all your fights because you get back the health, and that you can be healthy and have a lot of health later, or at least enough so you can stabilize your board with enough safety. Another broken comp, another broken augment is Idealism, because you can go on Lucian, can go on Ezreal, can go on Zed, can go on Caitlyn, can go on Poppy, even though Poppy is a bit weird, but if she has 3 items, why not? Stuff like this. So this is just broken. So here it's a little bit different than the other parts because we're playing fast 8 comps. Usually you have more flexibility with the highliners, and like I said, like Ezreal are still broken, Zed broken, you have Zac broken, Poppy really nice. So if you have Poppy highliner, you put the defensive items on Poppy instead, and Misfortune, but only with Jazz. If you can get these boards with Misfortune Jazz, so you have natural Ezreal 2, you have Z2, and you have Misfortune Jazz, don't sleep on it. It's really good. But if you have Misfortune Big Shot, don't even try. This is not going to be good because it doesn't bring any value. So that's why I still put Misfortune, but it's kind of situational, and most of the time you will skip her. But Misfortune Jazz can be really good here as long as you can find your focus units properly. Then we have Pentakill Executioners. I've talked a lot about this comp many times because it's been good for a long time and you have a lot of flexibility, much more than you can think, because the best version I'm showing here is when you have Karthus Pentakill as your headliner, so he gets Archangel Staff from a super fan, and then after you want to have Adaptive Helm to have more mana, and Hand of Justice, so he can value a lot of everything in this item because you get more crit, but crit is converted into AP, you get more AP, so that's nice, and you get also sustain, which is very clutch against Ezreal, because one of the main weakness of Karthus is like if he gets targeted by Ezreal, he will just die. I mean, he will lose a lot of health and then the next time he will die. But with Hand of Justice or Gunblade, he can literally never die from Ezreal as long as you have a good frontline that lasts for a long time. Then your side carry most likely is going to be Akali, but it can be Viego as well. It's fine if you have this stuff on Viego, because Viego is the first 2-star unit you found and not Akali, then you put it on Viego. If you can have on Akali, put it on Akali, it's nice as well. I'm actually starting to think that maybe Viego is much better, especially if you have 7 Pentakill. But if you have Executioner proc, then you will play with 4 Executioners and you have 5 Pentakill most likely. In that case, it's best to have an Akali. So truly be flexible with the headliner you find, the proc of the trait of the headliner, and who is going to be your first 2-star unit you find. And if it's Akali, put on Akali. If it's Viego, put on Viego. It's the same, they share most likely the same items. So for the elements I really like to have in this comp, Idealism once again, because like you have many units who can hold it. Binary is really nice because you have so many units you can stuff. You have Mordekaiser, Akali, Viego, Yorick, Karthus. So having items on all of them thanks to Binary is insanely good. Little Buddies is insanely good as well because you have Lilia, Gnar, and Kale. So as long as you have 3 1 cost 2 cost who can proc the Little Buddies on many units like Viego, Akali, Yorick, and Karthus, this is worth it. Try always to have 3 Little Buddies and let's say 4 cost and 5 cost units, and you have an insane value from this augment. And remember your roots as well, because everyone is sharing almost Pentakill or Executioners. Only Nico and Lilia don't really benefit it. So like I said earlier, I actually feel like Karthus, Pentakill, Viego, Pentakill are the best, but you also have Karthus Executioner, which is nice. You have Viego Edgelord, which is more like maybe A, but honestly it's not that bad because you can have 3 Edgelord and he can be your side carry. Then after you have Akali Exec, that's nice. KDA is a little bit weird, but it's playable. You can have like 5 Pentakill, 5 KDA, something like this. And Mordekaiser Pentakill is similarly to Misfortune Jazz. It's really nice as long as you are guaranteed to have Karthus 2, Viego 2, Akali 2. If you don't have them, you have to skip it because you have to make sure you have them 2 stars with the headliner. Then we have Disco TF. So Disco TF, I think most of you already know this comp, how to play it. It didn't really change much. This is a good comp you can play if you have a strong early game, because one of the main issue of TF is that he is not good enough when you're level 8 and he requires you to be level 9 to find the legendary units such as Ziggs, such as Illaoi, and because if you don't have these 2, TF is not going to make you win your fights. So this is why I really like to play this comp only if I have an extremely strong early mid game, so I can save ton of HP. So during stage 4, when I'm level 8 and looking for TF2 and Blitz 2, I will have a moment when I will lose a lot of fights, and this is the moment when you should not panic, so I can push level 9 and then find my late game win conditions such as Illaoi and Ziggs. TF now is much more flexible with the items, and actually you don't necessarily need to have a mana generation items on him. Ginzu Archangel Gunblade is nice because this is a comp that requires you to last long in the fight. The longer the fights are, the stronger you are thanks to Disco and thanks to Ginzu and Archangel. So that's why I really like to have Gunblade as your last item. And kind of similarly with Ziggs, having another Hextech Blade here is not bad in the sense that you might face in the late game a lot of Ezreal. You'll be extremely happy that both your carries have a way to come back with her health thanks to Gunblade. So you will be really happy with that, and that's why having double Gunblade is really not bad. Once again, Little Buddies, one of the best items to play this comp because you have Nami, you have Bard, and you have Gragas. So you have 3 once again, and they fit your team very well. Magic Wand is really nice. It can help Ziggs and Twisted Fate, but also on Blitzcrank. Don't underestimate Blitzcrank when he has more AP, he can deal 1k, 2k, 3k sometimes even of damage. And Keeper, because this gives tons of shield, it works with the disco ball. And New Recruit is something I really like to have because it can unlock one more space for your comp to have exactly 4 Dazzler, 5 Disco, 2 Hyperpop, 3 Spellweaver, 2 Sentinel, 2 Brother at level 8. Or even you can have Jazz at level 9, you can add Jazz. That's really nice to have. So I really like to have this. It's one of the comp that having one more unit is actually extremely valuable. So unfortunately for this comp, you don't have a lot of flexibility with the headliners. The best headliners are always TF Disco or Blitzcrank Disco. You don't really want the Dazzler version, you don't really want the Sentinel version, it's kind of weird. But one of the good things is like, since you play this comp, you will push level 8 at around 4-5. There will be a lot of people who will take out the focus units from other comps, like Pentakill, like this kind of stuff. So it's not that hard now to find them because usually you're not that contested and people will take all the focus before you, so you have more chance to find TF and Blitzcrank. And finally, the last comp I want to talk about, I don't consider this comp being A tier. I feel like this is more like a comp you want to play if you don't really know what to play and you're quite contested on many things, so you can try to build what you can. Is what we call Ahri Warrior. In that case, I showed the best version, which is Ahri KDA. Basically, it's Ahri with Akali KDA as your headliner. So the way it works is very simple. You have a super fan, you have Ahri as your main carry, but she should not be headliner. That's really important. She should not be your headliner. She can be your headliner, but it's best when she's not the headliner. And then after you have a headliner, the best is Akali, but you will see I'll show you some other headliners who will have one bonus item thanks to super fan and who can help Ahri deal the damage. So usually you like to have melee carries because except for Akali, the melee carries will help Ahri go through the tanks and deal damage that way by piercing the front line and then after go on the sidelines. So in that case, since you're not having Ahri headliner, the best items you want on her is Blue Buff, Gunblade, Nashor. I think you can remember why these 3 items are so good. And then after you want to have a great tank with defensive items, usually it's Neeko, especially if you have 7 KDA because all the stats are multiplied by quite a lot. And on Akali, since you don't play Executioner here, unless you have the proc with Executioner, you really want to have IE plus Hajj because she gets another Hajj with a super fan item, and that way she has a lot of damage and a lot of sustain as well. So if you play this comp, you want to have little buddies because it works very well. You have Lilia, you have Kennen, you have Seraphine and Kaysa, so that's 4 procs, and it procs unfortunately only on 3 units, but it's still okay. Like this is okay. Unfortunately, I said unfortunately because preferably you have like more units, but Neeko and Echo are too important to skip them. And after, things like Cybernetic work very well in this comp, similarly to Seraphine. This is very well, and do it for the fans as well. Since you're playing Ahri Warrior, you kind of want to make sure like your headliner, who is going to be a carry, will give a lot of health and sustain to your front line. So Lilia, Neeko and Kennen. So if we talk about the best headliners, the best is Akali with KDA because it allows you to have 7 KDA and have a lot of stats on everyone. You can also play with Executioners, but I feel like it's a little bit lacking compared to KDA. And then after A tier, I usually like to have something else than Ahri, but if you have Ahri, it's not the end of the world. You can still play Ahri, and you have to kind of build a second carry from zero by yourself. So Viego, Zed or Poppy, who can be a side carry. Honestly, I've seen some Poppy dealing, I think, 13k damage, tanking 20k damage in a single fight. I was never able to kill her, so this can happen, but it's very specific. So that's why Viego and Zed are usually easier to play, and that synergies well with Ahri anyway. But if you have Ahri as KDA, it's fine, don't worry. You can still have Akali 2 next to it, but you have to build her from scratch. And let's say you have another possibility is to have Neeko with KDA. That way you can still have 7 KDA, and she can have an incredible side effect, that is, she will always give 40 mana to your highest health unit whenever she casts. That's her headliner bonus if Akali or Ahri has more health than everyone else, and that might happen because we have 7 KDA, so they have tons of health. Ahri has a Nature's Tooth, so she can have even more health, so Ahri can literally be the second highest health unit of your team. So it means that whenever Nico uses her ability, Ahri will get full mana instantly and will cast instantly. There's a kind of a hidden synergy. It's really tricky. It's not as good as having Akali or all the other headliners, but this can be great as well if you have Nico 3. If you don't have Nico 3, it's not worth it. That's what I want to say about this. Alright, this has been quite a long video and I shared the 20 most competitive comps you can see on the ladder and in World Championships. Obviously, the best pro players will always find a way to tweak around them and make a new comp you probably didn't see before. But you know, I want to make sure with those 20 comps from this list is enough for you to cover like 99% of your game and have a very competitive grind in the last run, let's say, of set 10, so you can reach whatever goal you had and maybe reach Master, reach more Grandmaster. I don't know what is your goal, but something like this would be nice. As for myself, this is going to be the last video for this set. I'm going to take a break. I also have some competition I want to prepare and some casts of competitions. So I'll be quite busy. And at the very beginning of March, probably that's around the moment when Riot will communicate about 11, I'm going to make content about set 11 and help you have fun with the new set. I don't know how it looks like, but I'm quite expecting something great after such a banger. I hope that we have another banger. Until next time, see you at the top of the ladder.